Hi, I'm Robert Brand and I'm the Director for Spacecraft Communications, Navigation and Data for Team Stellar. I just thought I'd give you an update on our progress with some risk analysis for the various navigation systems that we'll be using to the moon. Last month, Team Stellar had a very big meeting in Dubai and to bed down a number of operational aspects for kicking off this project in a big way. Yes, we're coming in a little late, but we're coming in with a lot of firepower and a lot of opportunity to make this work in ways that are probably a little unexpected by the other teams, but that's fine. We're doing well. So this week we've been looking at the mission objectives and the mission profile, and trying to make sure that we've got a very strong idea of how we're going to progress these. As you'll know, from a navigation point of view, there's various ways we can navigate to the moon. We can do a direct launch towards the moon, we can do a direct landing, or we can orbit, and there's a number of ways we can go to the moon via L points or direct, and so on. Various aspects come into play. Navigation is key to this. We need to make sure that we have a very good fix on the spacecraft, absolutely strong fix and strong control over the spacecraft pointing, maybe rotation for cooling and whatever it takes. So comms comes into that. If you're going to rotate a spacecraft to keep it cool, you must also point the antennas back to the various points on Earth. And initially, as we're close to the Earth, that'll be even more critical, because we will be swapping dishes from time to time as the Earth rotates. So we've got to make sure that we don't have our spacecrafts lose track of us as well during those procedures. But nonetheless, the real key to this is knowing where the spacecraft is at all times, so that we can initiate the right braking procedures, and whether we go into orbit or direct landing, what our errors are in making all of this happen. And so far we've had some fairly good news, especially on the speed and positioning as far as the altitude above the moon is concerned. They're really key things, because if you know how high up you are and you know how fast you're going, you're able to apply the most efficient way of braking and not have to brake too hard, too late, or too early, and then burn too many times to get yourself down. The key thing is to have as much fuel left over as possible, and to make sure that you're not going to land in some place that's very difficult. Of course, Google Lunar X Prize also has the opportunity to win a bit more if you're able to have very accurate landings and get near an historic site, or whether you can survive a night or things like that. So we have to look at how we can go about achieving these extra things if we're capable of doing it, and so far it's looking good. Now, we're not going to take 8 or 9 different navigational systems on board with us. Of course, that's a weight issue for those that aren't aware. And yes, we may actually take more than we need, and we may dump some of those navigation systems before we actually try to land on the moon. But nonetheless, when they weigh 20 kilos or more, you've really got to think twice about whether you can really have these on board with you. The main issue is getting down on the moon and getting your rover out to basically achieve the goals that the X Prize requires. Anything else is a plus. So knowing that we'll be having a good sense of our altitude above the moon and our speed gives us a great feeling for the success of this. Finding out how accurate we can be in other aspects of positioning will just be icing on the cake, as we say. I'd like to also welcome aboard Vanessa Clark, who is a graduate from Sydney University, and she's just leaving Sydney as I speak, headed off to Europe to do a bit of work with another space company, and she's already checked that there'll be no conflict with what we're doing and what she's doing, and thus she'll be on board with my department and looking at the risk analysis for the various aspects of the navigation side and refining our profile for the mission. We will also have a lot of input with comms, of course, with what bands and everything. We're already looking at a number of bands and having our own capability of communicating with the craft, not relying on others, and that is fairly fundamental to our future work and how we perceive what we're doing for the longer term and not just the short term. So I can't be any clearer than that at the moment. There's a lot of strategic stuff that I make sure that I'm not saying, but nonetheless I'm very pleased with where we are. We've already done a major timeline for what we need to do before our launch, and everything is happily going into play early enough that we'll be able to achieve all those goals from my perspective, and that's basically communicating with the spacecraft, backup communications, communications via other groups such as NASA and some commercial interests, navigation from a whole range of different systems that we've got to choose wisely, but basically we should have a fantastic time getting ourselves to the moon. I'm really looking forward to this. We will be working with the guidance group and the spacecraft group to make sure that we have the fine control we need to position this spacecraft very accurately for landing. So far, so good. We also will need to work closely with the rover communications back to the lander and ensure that we do have the range that we believe we'll have on the moon and the ability to survive a lunar night if we so choose to take on that challenge. The final thing is the data network around the Earth. Had a good look at that, and it's actually the easiest thing of my department, but nonetheless it's something we have to take care of, and we've had a lot of offers of assistance from outside. Various companies and carriers are certainly keen to get involved with us so that we complete the work that we need to do. We're looking at having a couple of mission control centres and communications with some large dishes and backup dishes and a whole lot of things. So it won't be easy. We'll need a lot of ability to have backup and redundancy. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, and we don't want to leave anything to chance. So that's it from me. Look forward to meeting up with all the other people from the Google Lunar X Prize teams very shortly in South America. Look forward to a whole range of fun activities this year, and really up to the very big launch at, well, whenever that launch comes next year. And I'm just so keen. And, you know, I go back and I look at the lessons learned from the Apollo days. A lot of my close friends are actually Apollo astronauts. It's quite a fun thing. When I was 17, I actually wired up a lot of the gear that was used in Sydney to switch the video between the Parkes Radio Telescope and Honeysuckle Creek. And not many people know that it was actually Honeysuckle Creek that took the first video from the Apollo 11 landing, and then they cut over to the Parkes Radio Telescope sometime later. Quite an amazing story, but there was a terrible windstorm at Parkes, and NASA was a bit scared to use the feed. I was actually back at college because I'd wired it all up during my term break, so I was sitting with all the other students having a look on a black and white television at all the handiwork, feeling rather smug that I'd had something to do with Apollo 11 and the moon landing. So that was gear that was actually in Sydney. But the lessons learned were lessons such as Armstrong nearly running out of fuel and landing very close to a boulder field and having to take manual control and going along to try and assure himself that he had a good landing site for this and not tip over the lander. We want to have ample fuel left over. We want to be able to have a very large buffer for what we're doing. And I did have some other good news too. Yeah, my friend Nick Howes in the UK has offered assistance from 2 optical telescopes that will help us track the spacecraft during the flight to the moon. So there's a lot of various groups coming in behind us here, and we're looking at having, I guess, quite a few other groups joining in with us to provide a lot of facilities to make this an amazing opportunity for us, and even here in Australia, you know, there's some incredible opportunities to bring space right to our doorstep, to work with kids on watching us fly to the moon and being able to track us and see what we're doing, to actually fly some experiments on high altitude balloons as part of our project, and to return those experiments back to the schools so that they can publish the results. So we'll probably take some small modules that they build and pack them away for a high altitude balloon flight. So that'll get the projects to probably 1/3 of the way to space, and basically to an atmospheric pressure of less than 1% that of Earth. They'll be up very high in the sky, looking at higher levels of radiation, a whole range of different opportunities and experiments that they'll be able to do. So we're looking forward to seeing what schools and kids do come up with, and engaging with them so that we can provide the people working in space in the future, just getting that inspiration going and everything else. And we're hoping that our flight and the whole Google Lunar X Prize is pretty amazing to kids, and the fact that we are going back to the moon with a whole range of commercial spacecraft and not just government-owned spacecraft. This will be quite an amazing trip, and I'm so looking forward to it. Okay, until my next update. This is something I hope to do each week, but all the best till then. Thank you very much.